I can pinpoint the exact moment I believed nothing could touch me. It was a Tuesday night in Chicago, sitting in my cramped apartment with my laptop heating up my thighs, watching numbers climb on my trading screen like they were racing each other to the top. The room was cold because I kept the heat low to save money, but I didn't feel it anymore. I kept hitting refresh even though the platform updated automatically, just to see that balance jump with my own eyes, to make it feel real. I remember laughing out loud to nobody, raising my beer can to the empty room like I was toasting an invisible crowd. My phone kept buzzing against the table. Sarah texting me about dinner plans, Mom asking if I'd called my brother back, my buddy Jake sending memes. But I ignored them all because right there, right in that moment, my wildest dream was happening in real time, and I didn't want to miss a second of it. There's a quote I heard once that says, "The higher you climb, the harder you fall." But when you're climbing, you don't think about falling. You just think about how good the view is going to be at the top. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know if anyone out there has felt what I'm about to tell you. I wasn't always this guy. 6 months earlier, I was Brian Carter, 38 years old, working construction management in the freezing Chicago winters, coming home with mud on my boots and aching shoulders. I'd spend my evenings at the kitchen table with my laptop open, learning about cryptocurrency trading while eating microwave dinners. It started as curiosity more than anything else. I'd scroll through forums where people talked about Bitcoin and Ethereum like they were lottery tickets that you could somehow predict. I read everything I could find. Charts, patterns, technical analysis, all of it. I opened a small account with $300 I had left over after bills 1 month. That was 2 years before this story really begins. For months I made nothing. I'd place tiny trades on Bitcoin, watching it swing up and down, trying to spot patterns that made sense to me. Sometimes I'd make $20. Sometimes I'd lose 15. It felt like playing poker with spare change, nothing serious, just something to do after work instead of watching TV. But slowly, over those 2 years, something clicked. I started winning more than I lost. Not by much at first. Maybe I'd win 55% of my trades instead of 50, but that was enough. I'd make enough here and there to pay for a night out, or cover my car payment 1 month, or buy myself something nice I'd been wanting. The thrill of being right about the market, of predicting where prices would go before they went there, it became addictive in the best way. I felt like I'd found a puzzle that my brain was wired to solve. My ex-wife, Karen, thought it was a waste of time when we were together. She'd see me hunched over the laptop at night and roll her eyes, asking me when I was going to grow up and focus on real life. Maybe that's part of why we split. I couldn't explain to her that this felt more real than anything else I was doing. After the divorce was finalized and my daughter Emma went off to college, I sat in my empty apartment, looking at my trading account. I'd built it up to $18,000 over those 2 years. Nothing huge, but it was mine. I'd made it from nothing using just my brain and my ability to read the market. That's when the voice in my head got louder. The voice that said, what if this could be more than a hobby? I'd been to the Philippines twice before on vacation, once right after my divorce when I needed to get away from everything, and once the year after with a friend. Both times I fell in love with the place. Manila felt alive in a way Chicago never did. The energy, the warmth, the fact that my dollars went so much further there. I could live like a king on what I'd spend just surviving in the States. The idea formed slowly at first, then all at once. What if I cashed out my retirement account, took everything I had, moved to Manila and traded full-time? I'd have enough capital to make real money, not just pocket change. The Philippines would be cheap enough that I could live well while building my account. And maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to build the life I'd always wanted instead of the one I'd settled for. I made the decision on a Sunday morning. I was 40 years old, single, no debt except my car, and my daughter was already independent. I had $52,000 in my retirement account and $18,000 in my trading account. $70,000 total. If I moved to Manila and lived modestly, I could trade with $50,000 and still have enough to survive for a year, even if I made nothing. But I wasn't planning to make nothing. I was planning to make enough that I'd never have to work another freezing winter construction job again. My friend Jake thought I was insane when I told him. He looked at me across the bar, like I'd just said I was joining a cult. But I didn't care. The belief had taken root in me so deep that nothing could shake it. The flight to Manila felt like flying toward my future instead of away from my past. I'd sold almost everything I owned except my clothes and laptop. I had 2 suitcases and a backpack. I'd rented a small studio apartment in Makati sight unseen through an expat Facebook group. It was on the 20th floor with a view of the city and cost me $400 a month. Sans Chicago, I'd been paying $1,200 for a place half as nice. When I arrived and saw the apartment for the first time, standing at that window looking out at the Manila skyline at night with all the lights spread out below me, I knew I'd made the right choice. This was where my new life would begin. The first month was lonely in a way I hadn't expected. I didn't know anyone. I'd spend my days in the apartment trading, trying to adjust to the time difference so I could catch the best market hours. The crypto markets never sleep, but the big moves usually happened when the US and Europe were active, which meant I was trading at odd hours in Manila. I'd wake up at 2 in the morning to check my positions, make trades, then try to sleep again before the sun came up. It was exhausting, but I told myself it was temporary. Once I made enough money, I could hire someone to help me or just trade more casually. I'd go days without speaking to another person, except to order food or buy groceries. But the trading was going well. Better than well. In that first month, I turned $50,000 into $57,000. $7,000 in profit. More money than I'd make in a month working construction. I sat there staring at the number thinking, this is it. This is really happening. I'm actually doing this. The second month was when things accelerated. I started taking bigger positions, using more leverage to multiply my gains. Crypto platforms let you borrow money essentially. So if you put up $1,000, you could control $10,000 or even $20,000 worth of Bitcoin. It's risky because if the price moves against you, you lose everything fast. But if it moves in your direction, you make 10 or 20 times what you would have made. I started using 5-to-1 leverage, then 10-to-1. I told myself I was being careful, that I knew what I was doing, that I'd set stop losses to protect myself, and for a while it worked beautifully. I made $12,000 in my second month, then $18,000 in my third. I was averaging $6,000 a week by the time month 4 started. That's when my life changed completely. Success does something to you. It makes you feel bigger than you are. I started going out at night to the bars in Makati and Bonifacio Global City. I'd order expensive whiskey and tip the bartenders 100 pesos at a time just because I could. I met a girl named Maria at a rooftop bar one night. She was 24, beautiful, with long dark hair and a smile that made me forget I was twice her age. We talked for hours that first night. She told me about her life, her family in the provinces, her dreams of traveling. I told her I was a trader, that I'd moved to the Philippines to build something. She seemed impressed. When I paid the bill that night without looking at it, I saw her eyes widen a little. 2 weeks later, she moved into my apartment. I didn't even question it. Having her there made the lonely nights disappear. She'd wake up when I was trading and bring me coffee. She'd massage my shoulders when I was stressed about a position. She made me feel like I wasn't crazy for doing this, like someone believed in me. I started buying her things. A new phone, clothes. I'd give her money to send back to her family. It felt good to be the provider, to be the guy who could take care of someone. My trading kept getting better. I had a week where I made $23,000. $23,000 in 7 days. I remember standing up from my desk and actually yelling in celebration. Maria came running in asking what happened, and I just spun her around laughing. That week I bought myself a Tag Heuer watch I'd always wanted. $4,000. I put it on my wrist and felt like a different person. I wasn't construction worker Brian anymore. I was trader Brian, the guy who made things happen, the guy who took risks and won. I started taking Maria to expensive restaurants, the kind with white tablecloths and wine lists thicker than phone books. We'd order dishes I couldn't even pronounce, and I'd smile when the bill came because the number didn't matter anymore. Money was just a tool and I had plenty of it. By month 5, I'd made over $100,000 in profit. Combined with what I started with, I had $170,000 in my account. It was more money than I'd ever had in my life. I sent my daughter Emma $10,000 as a surprise. I told her it was for whatever she needed, tuition, rent, fun, anything. She called me crying, asking where I got the money, and I just laughed and said I was doing well, not to worry. I thought about calling my ex-wife just to tell her I'd made it, that her doubts about me were wrong, but I didn't. I didn't need her validation anymore. I had Maria, I had money. I had freedom. What else could I possibly need? That's when I met Anna. She was a bartender at a place I'd started going to in BGC. 26 years old, funny, smart, with this confidence that drew me in immediately. We started talking one night when the bar was slow. She asked what I did and I told her. She seemed genuinely interested, asking questions about trading, about how I learned, about my life. Before I knew it, we were texting every day, then meeting up. Then she was coming over to my place when Maria wasn't there. I know how that sounds. I'm not proud of it, but in that moment, living in Manila with money flowing in and women interested in me, I felt like I deserved it. Like this was the life I'd been working toward my whole life, and I should enjoy every second. I told Maria about Anna. I said if she wanted to stay with me, she'd have to accept that I wasn't going to be exclusive. I expected her to leave, but she didn't. She said okay. She said she understood. And I realize now it was because of the money, because of what I could give her. But back then I convinced myself it was because she really cared about me. I had both of them in my life, and I was making money hand over fist. Some weeks I'd make 30,000, some weeks 15, but it kept coming. I moved to a bigger apartment, a penthouse unit in BGC with floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view that made me feel like I owned the city. $3,000 a month for rent, but I didn't care. I bought a second watch, this one even nicer. I was flying to Cebu or Boracay every other weekend, taking Maria or Anna, or sometimes both of them separately. I was living the fantasy. The American dream, except in the Philippines. I'd video call Jake back home and show him my view, my life, and he'd just shake his head. He told me I'd changed, that I didn't seem like myself. But I told him I'd finally become myself. The version of me that was always meant to exist. My trading strategy by this point was barely a strategy anymore. I'd see a setup I liked, and I'd go all in with 20-to-1 leverage. If it moved against me, I'd add to the position, doubling down, telling myself it had to come back eventually. And for months it did. Every time I was down, I'd add more, and the position would reverse, and I'd make even more than I expected. I started believing I couldn't lose, that I'd figured out something other traders hadn't, that I had a gift. Looking back, I can see it was just luck. Blind, stupid luck. But luck feels like skill when you're winning. Anna asked me one day how much money I'd made total. We were lying in bed in my penthouse, and she was tracing her fingers on my chest. I told her probably 200,000 in profit over the past 6 months. Her eyes went wide. She asked what I was going to do with all that money. I told her I was going to keep trading, keep making more, maybe buy property, maybe invest in a business. The truth was I didn't know. I hadn't thought past the next trade, the next win, the next high. She asked if I ever thought about slowing down, taking some profits, being safe. I laughed and told her safe was for people who were afraid of success. That comment haunts me now. Maria came to me one afternoon while Anna was out. She'd been quieter than usual for a few days. She sat down next to me and said her family needed help. Her father was sick, and they needed money for treatment. She needed $40,000. I didn't even hesitate. I transferred the money that same day. $40,000 gone just like that. She cried and hugged me and said I was the most generous man she'd ever met. I felt like a hero, like I'd saved her family. What I didn't think about was how much of my capital I was bleeding away. I'd made $200,000 in profit, but I'd spent almost all of it. The watches, the trips, the rent, the restaurants, the gifts, the $40,000 I just gave Maria. I was making money faster than ever, but I was spending it even faster. My actual account balance was back down to around $80,000. Still more than I started with, but not by much. I told myself it was fine. I'd just make more. It was easy. I'd proven I could do it. That's when the cracks started showing. I had a trade go bad. Bitcoin dropped hard one morning and I was leveraged 20-to-1. I watched my account drop $30,000 in an hour. Instead of cutting the loss, I added to the position, convinced it would bounce back. It didn't. It kept dropping. I added again and again. By the time I finally admitted defeat and closed everything, I'd lost $50,000. Half my account gone in one day. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling physically sick. Maria asked what was wrong, and I snapped at her to leave me alone. I'd never felt panic like that before. Real fear that I'd made a terrible mistake. But then I told myself it was one bad day, one unlucky trade. I'd had hundreds of good ones. This was just part of the game. I spent the next week trying to make it back. I was trading around the clock, barely sleeping, surviving on energy drinks and coffee. Maria and Anna both asked if I was okay, but I pushed them away. I didn't want distractions. I needed to focus. I needed to win. I made back 10,000, then lost 15, made back 8, lost 12. I was on a roller coaster, and I couldn't get off. My account balance swung wildly every day. The stress was eating me alive, but I couldn't stop. I'd convinced myself that one big win would fix everything, that I just needed to be patient and wait for the right setup. Then Maria dropped a bomb. She came to me one morning and said she wanted to get married, that she loved me and wanted to build a life together. I looked at her like she'd lost her mind. I reminded her I had another girlfriend, that I'd been clear from the start. This wasn't that kind of relationship. She started crying, saying she thought things had changed, that giving her money for her father proved I cared. I felt anger rise in me, not at her exactly, but at the situation. I'd given her $40,000, and now she was trying to guilt me into marriage. I told her no. She packed her things that same day and left. As she walked out, she said something I'll never forget. She said I'd changed from the kind man she met into someone she didn't recognize. That money had poisoned me. I slammed the door behind her and told myself she was just bitter. But part of me wondered if she was right. I decided I needed a break. I flew to Angeles City by myself, a place I'd heard about but never visited. I stayed in a nice hotel and spent the week trying to clear my head. But instead of clarity, I found more chaos. I went out every night, drank too much, spent money on people whose names I don't remember. I was trying to outrun the feeling that I was losing control. When I got back to Manila after a week, I'd spent another $15,000 and felt worse than when I left. My account was down to $42,000 now. I'd started with $70,000 6 months ago. I'd made over $200,000 in profit, and somehow I was barely above where I started. The math didn't make sense, but I knew it was true. I'd bled money everywhere I went, and now I was running out of runway. Anna was the only one who seemed to notice how stressed I was. She'd come over and just sit with me while I traded. She didn't ask for anything. She just wanted to be there. One night she asked me point blank if I was going to be okay. I told her, of course, that I always figured things out. But my voice didn't sound convincing even to me. She kissed my forehead and said she hoped I was right. That was the last real conversation we had before everything fell apart. I decided I needed one big trade to get back on track. Just one. Something I was absolutely certain about that would take my account back to where it should be and beyond. I studied the charts for days. I analyzed every pattern, every indicator, every signal I could find. Bitcoin had been consolidating, and I was convinced it was about to break higher. I built a plan. I'd enter with 20-to-1 leverage, and if it moved against me, I'd add to the position at certain levels, averaging down, knowing that when it eventually reversed, I'd make everything back, plus a massive profit. It was risky, but I'd done it dozens of times before. It always worked. Always I entered the trade on a Monday morning at 4 a.m. Manila time. $10,000 with 20-to-1 leverage meant I was controlling $200,000 worth of Bitcoin. It felt huge, but I was confident. I watched the charts obsessively all day. By Monday evening, Bitcoin hadn't moved much. Just choppy sideways action. I went to sleep that night telling myself to be patient. Tuesday morning, I woke up to see Bitcoin had dropped. I was down $8,000. My heart was pounding, but I told myself this was expected. This was part of the plan. I added another $10,000 to the position. Now I had $20,000 on the line, leveraged 20-to-1, $400,000 in exposure. If Bitcoin dropped much more, I'd be completely wiped out. Tuesday was torture. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think. I just watched the charts move up and down, each movement feeling like someone was squeezing my chest. Bitcoin would drop and I'd feel panic. Then it would bounce and I'd feel hope. Then it would drop again. By Tuesday night, I was down $16,000 total. I had $26,000 left in my account. I added another $8,000 to the position. Everything I had left except what I needed to cover the margin requirements. I was all in. Completely, totally all in. If Bitcoin dropped another 10%, I'd be liquidated. Everything would be gone. I lay in bed that night unable to sleep, refreshing the charts on my phone every few seconds. Anna texted asking if I wanted to see her, but I ignored it. I couldn't think about anything except that trade. Wednesday morning, Bitcoin moved sideways for hours. I felt like I was losing my mind. I'd put everything on this one trade, and it was just hovering there, not going up or down enough to matter. Then around noon it started dropping, slowly at first, then faster. I watched my account value plummet. 20,000 left, 15,000, 10,000. I was screaming at my screen, begging it to stop. But it didn't stop. It kept falling. At 2 p.m. my position was liquidated, automatically closed by the system because I'd run out of margin. My account balance showed $1,100. Out of 70,000 I'd started with, out of over 200,000 I'd made. All I had left was $1,100. I sat there for hours staring at the empty screen. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there in complete silence, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Everything I'd built over 6 months gone in 3 days. Every dollar I'd made, every win I'd celebrated, every moment I'd felt invincible. All of it was meaningless now. I'd gambled everything on one trade and lost. I called Anna, but she didn't pick up. I realized I hadn't paid my rent in 2 months because I kept thinking I'd catch up after my next big win. I had expensive watches I could sell. I had some cash in the bank, maybe $8,000, but that was it. My dream was over. The next few days are a blur. I told Anna what happened when she finally came over. She looked at me with pity and said she needed space. She left and I haven't heard from her since. I tried calling Maria, but her number was disconnected. I realized she'd probably blocked me after I rejected her. I was completely alone in this expensive penthouse I couldn't afford anymore. I sold both watches back to the dealer I bought them from. Got maybe 60% of what I paid. That gave me another $12,000. I moved out of the penthouse into a cheap monthly rental. I started looking at flights back to Chicago. I didn't want to go back to the cold and the construction sites, and admitting to everyone that I'd failed. But I didn't have a choice. I'd burned through my entire life savings, chasing a dream that turned out to be a delusion. I flew back to Chicago 3 weeks later. Jake picked me up from the airport. He didn't say anything when he saw me. Just gave me a hug. I moved into his spare room because I had nowhere else to go. I got my old job back through a former boss who took pity on me. I was 41 years old, starting from scratch. Less than scratch. I had maybe $15,000 total to my name. I'd lost $55,000 of my own money, plus $200,000 in profits. I'd lost 6 months of my life. I'd lost my dignity and my confidence, and my belief that I could do something special. All of it gone because I couldn't separate luck from skill. Because I let success convince me I was invincible. Because I thought I was smarter than the market. The worst part wasn't the money. It was facing myself in the mirror every morning and knowing how stupid I'd been, how I'd ignored every warning sign, how I'd let greed and ego destroy everything I'd worked for. I think about Maria sometimes and what she said about money poisoning me. She was right. I'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone who valued having multiple girlfriends over genuine connection, someone who bought expensive watches to feel important, someone who gambled away a fortune because admitting I was wrong felt impossible. The Brian who flew to Manila full of hope and dreams feels like a different person now, someone naive and reckless and blind, someone I'm embarrassed to have been. I haven't traded since that day. Can't bring myself to even look at a chart. What started as a hobby I loved became an addiction that consumed me. The moment I tried to make it my entire life instead of just a piece of it, that's when I lost control. Those early wins that made me feel like a genius, they were just luck. Dumb luck that I mistook for skill. The universe gave me enough wins to build false confidence and then took it all away to teach me the lesson I needed to learn. That confidence without humility is just arrogance waiting to be punished. That money amplifies who you are, but it doesn't change who you are. That success without wisdom is just failure waiting to happen. I'm still paying the price today. I'm back in Chicago working construction, living in Jake's spare room at 41, starting over from nothing. My daughter knows what happened. I had to tell her when I couldn't help her financially anymore. She still loves me, but I can see the disappointment in her eyes. My ex-wife heard through mutual friends and didn't say anything except that she wasn't surprised. That hurt more than anything. Everyone I'd wanted to prove wrong was right about me all along. I wasn't special. I wasn't a genius trader. I was just a guy who got lucky and confused luck with talent. A guy who flew too close to the sun believing he couldn't get burned. A guy who lost everything because he couldn't recognize when enough was enough. Sometimes, late at night, I lie in bed and think about that Tuesday in Manila when my laptop was heating up my thighs and the numbers kept climbing and I felt untouchable. I think about how real it all felt. How certain I was that I'd figured everything out. How obvious it seemed that this was my destiny. And I realize now that confidence is the most dangerous emotion you can feel when you're gambling, because it tricks you into thinking you're not gambling at all, that you're investing or trading or building something, when really you're just rolling dice and praying. The house always wins eventually. The market always humbles you in the end. The only question is how much you'll lose before you learn the lesson. I hope one day I'll be okay with what happened, that I'll forgive myself for being so reckless and stupid, that I'll rebuild and find a different path forward. But right now, 3 months after everything fell apart, I'm just trying to survive each day, trying to accept that the life I wanted, the one I tasted for 6 beautiful months in Manila, is gone forever, that the watches and the girls and the penthouse and the freedom were all temporary illusions, built on a foundation of luck that was destined to crumble. I had everything I'd ever dreamed of in the palm of my hand, and I squeezed so hard trying to hold on to it that it slipped right through my fingers. That's the price of believing you're invincible. That's what happens when you confuse a hot streak with a system. That's the lesson I learned the hardest way possible. And it's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life, whether I want to or not.